Hello everyone, and thank you for taking time to watch this video about how we can all learn effectively. My name is Mr. Torrell, and at the school I teach business and enterprise. I also lead all teacher development in the school, so understanding how we learn is a real passion of mine. In this video, I'd like to share with you some of our key understanding as to how we can effectively help our students, your children, to learn as best as they can. There's a fair amount to cover this under this heading, so we've split the load into two parts to make it manageable for you. Mrs. Allen, who is also a member of the teaching and learning team at the school and a highly experienced teacher and head of department, will take you through the second part. So let's begin by taking a look at this. It's called Ebbinghaus's Curve of Forgetting. Hermann Ebbinghaus, a German psychologist from the early 20th century, discovered that up to 90% of what we absorb we will forget within a month, and that from the moment we are made aware of something we are likely to begin to forget it. As you can see from the graph, Ebbinghaus found that repetition of learning and spacing out of this repetition of learning can have a significant impact on what we can retain and for how long. This understanding forms the basis for many of our teaching strategies we now use. It's important to note that no scientific studies since have shown that this is not the case. This fundamental idea from psychology has meant that cognitive science, the study of the mind, now plays a key part in our understanding and approach to learning. A second key point to note is that our memory has two distinct parts: the long-term memory, where we store information, and the working memory, our ability to recall information and use it now. This is important because crucially the working memory is very limited. If we overload our working memory, too many ideas at once, or too many tasks or bits of information to process at a time, our working memory cannot cope, and whatever we're doing is likely to have little to no positive impact on our long-term memory and our ability to learn. As teachers, we want every child to learn as much as they possibly can, so our goal is to move as much teaching to our long-term memory as possible. What myself and Mrs. Allen would like to share with you are some key strategies that can help us all remember. Teachers in school will regularly talk about these strategies in their lessons. They will plan their lessons with this very much in mind. And what's just as important is that we share this understanding with you and our students too. We want them to understand, and we want you to understand, how we can all learn effectively. We want our students, your children, to be getting the most from any effort they have put into their work. And furthermore, with the support of home, we think we can make this learning become even more effective. So I'm going to begin with the most important element of learning, and that is practice. And we call it retrieval practice. Remembering that curve, the Ebbinghaus's curve of forgetting, identifies that the more we practice, the greater our chance of securing this learning in our long-term memory. Once it's there, and if we regularly look to recall it, it'll become easier for us to recall it over a longer period of time. Let's take a simple example. The example of learning your times tables. If you've learnt your times tables really well at primary school, it frees up space in your working memory as you approach other more challenging topics, say for example multiplying fractions. I can focus on the process steps of multiplying the fraction whilst not having to worry about what 5 times 4 is. Because I've learnt my times tables, it's automatic. The idea of repeated practice can be seen when we drive too. The processes have become automatic. The many aspects and things that we need to do, changing gear, using an indicator at the same time as reducing speed and using a brake, they've become automatic because we have practiced and we've over-practiced as such. Therefore, retrieval practice, the idea of retrieving from our mind on a regular basis something we've covered in class, is absolutely crucial. What's really important to note here is that this retrieval practice needs to make you think. If you're not having to think as you practice, then the actual practice is not going to be having the desired effect. Securing that learning in our long-term memory. Thinking about something isn't particularly pleasant. It doesn't feel overly great initially. That difficulty is actually a good thing to help us remember long term. Just like an athlete who wants to get faster or stronger, the training for that isn't particularly nice. They have to push themselves and take themselves out of their comfort zone. The same is true of learning. Don't be just rewriting your notes or copying them out, the stuff you will have looked at in class. You've got to create a challenge. And try to do it from memory to begin with. Take a moment to read some of the activities that you can do at home, and we encourage your children to do to help promote retrieval practice. So quizzing yourself on a topic using flashcards, crosswords and match-up tasks. Set a time limit of say 3 minutes, and on a blank piece of paper record everything you can, or your child can, from a lesson or topic. Mind maps are really good as well, but they're only really good at that time of thinking. The idea of just rereading over them, if you want to strengthen that memory, doesn't really work. It's the idea of having to think that strengthens the memory. And clearly there'll be things that you can't remember. And at that point, children need to refer back to their notes, refer back to any materials that they have to fill in the gaps. But remember to do this after the thinking part. The idea of just rereading your notes and highlighting keywords might look good and it might feel good, but the scientific evidence suggests that it will have minimal impact on your long-term learning. Therefore, the idea of retrieve instead of reread should always be at the forefront of our minds. Yes, it's more difficult, but it is 100% more beneficial. So number 1, key strategy for learning is lots of practice. Lots of practice that makes you think is crucial. There are other ways to support this memory process, and I plan on just looking at a few of those now. So another way of strengthening the memory of something is to space up that practice and mix it up. We call this spacing and interleaving. Essentially, it's more effective to space out your retrieval practice and to keep coming back to it than it is to lump it all together at once. Little and often is more effective than cramming or blocking something in. It may initially seem counterproductive. New material may take longer to be seen, but the actual learning and your memory of it will be stronger. The idea of interleaving, this idea of mixing up topics, is also potentially beneficial as well. Just be mindful that you don't want to mix up too many different topics at once. Keep them from a similar subject or a similar area of study. For example, studying science by splitting an hour into 3 20-minute blocks, 20 minutes on biology, 20 minutes physics, and 20 minutes chemistry, can be a lot more beneficial than 1 hour just on one topic or subject. Many experiments have shown spacing out and interleaving your study, mixing it up over a longer period, is more beneficial in the longer term compared to blocking your study, a block of study on one topic or subject. And that can be seen in this chart here. Those students who mixed their study, interleaved and practiced, in their practice performance, didn't do so well as those that blocked study. However, longer term, when it came to the test, Those that had mixed up and interleaved their study scored higher, considerably higher, than those that had blocked their study. Initially, you may feel it's more difficult, it's harder, but these desirable difficulties will produce a better long-term outcome, and in this sense, and as we've seen, a better result. So, key things to do. Switch between your topics as you revisit and study them at home, and space out this learning. Little and often is the key message here. You could create a plan or a timetable for your learning at home, which allows for spacing and promotes the idea of interleaving. And finally, in part 1 of how to learn effectively, I want to make you aware of this idea called dual coding. For this, the crucial thing to remember is that 2 is better than 1. To dispel a myth about how we learn effectively, this is not learning styles. There is no evidence to suggest that we learn more effectively if we present information to people in their preferred learning style, whether that be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. However, what there is evidence to support is the idea of 2 means of being presented with information is better than 1. Verbal and visual is better than just one of those, hence the dual. Ways to do this. Combine words and visuals. Look at your work and find visuals. Can you create a drawing to represent some of the work, maybe even as a retrieval exercise from class? Compare them to your words. Look at visuals and explain them in your own words. Take information you're trying to learn and draw visuals to go along with it. So if we are presenting material, a picture or diagram can really support our learning. If we can find these, that's great, but it's important to note that it shouldn't detract from the key learning message, and it most definitely shouldn't eat into a big chunk of your time you've dedicated to learning or revisiting a topic by creating or searching for images, for example on Google. However, they can play a really useful way in helping us remember. The old adage of a picture speaks 1,000 words really does have a place here in helping us learn. So it may be that as part of your retrieval practice, you try to draw a visual representation or answer parts of a diagram. An infographic, as can be seen here in the bottom left, or a visual timeline in the top left, could be a really powerful way of helping you remember. So that's it for part 1 of this look at how we can learn effectively. I hope you found it useful, informative, and a way to support your child's learning at Aylsham High School. The booklet outlining the strategies that we use in school and you can support with at home can be found on the school website under the Learning tab. When you get the opportunity, please take a look at part 2 where Mrs. Allen will be covering 2 more key strategies and providing other ways you can support your child's learning. Take care and thank you for your time.